Hey guys, tonight we're time traveling straight into the bustling, murky streets of Elizabethan London. A place where you can almost taste the air and… fair warning, that air tastes suspiciously like cheese. You slip out of the shadows, greeted by a damp breeze that somehow manages to be both sharp and faintly milky at the same time. Stalls creak open, vendors shout, and the first thing you do, before worrying about getting pickpocketed or stepping in something best left unidentified, is wrinkle your nose. The smell is everywhere, crumbly, sharp, sometimes sweet, and always hovering on the edge of overwhelming. If you think you've survived worse city scents, well, you probably won't survive this one, at least not with your appetite intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fun to see who's drifting off in the morning, and who's just surrendered to insomnia at 3 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, boots squelching in a lane where the ground is slick with mud and, let's just call it, urban compost. Lanterns flicker overhead, painting the alley in trembling gold. You pass a line of carters unloading barrels, each one puffing out clouds of vapor that mingle with the city's natural bouquet. The further you walk, the thicker the air becomes, like stepping through an invisible cheesecloth. This isn't some cartoonish, one-note stink, it's a symphony. Sharp whiffs of Cheshire cheese meet the creamy tang of Somerset, undercut by a blue-veined punch that could knock out a lesser nose. And just when you start to acclimate, someone opens a cellar door and out comes a wall of air so rich with moldy rinds you swear you can taste the color green. That's the thing about London in the late 1500s. Cheese is everywhere. Cheese is breakfast. Cheese is supper. Cheese is the snack you nibble when you can't afford real meat. It's grated, crumbled, melted, baked, even stuffed into pies and pastries that, ironically, still manage to taste mostly like cheese. Mainstream history tells us about Shakespeare, the Spanish Armada, the Globe Theatre, but what they rarely mention is how the city's signature scent wasn't wood smoke or roasting chestnuts, but the daily tide of dairy drifting down every street. Historians agree that London's population was swelling fast, maybe over 200,000 souls by 1600. Give or take the usual debate about lost parish records and questionable census math. More people meant more mouths to feed. And with unreliable refrigeration, none. Cheese was the go-to protein. Sure, you could buy a slab of beef if you had the coin. But most folks settled for a chunk of cheddar wrapped in linen. Or a crumbly white cheese you bought from a toothless grandmother who swore hers cured everything from melancholy to foot rot. Of course, it wasn't just cheese in the air. The city had its own unique blend, a touch of river mud, the sharp tang of tanneries working overtime, a hint of chimney soot for body, and, if you were unlucky, the fragrant leavings of 100 horses and 1,000 chamber pots. But somehow, cheese remained the dominant note, like a musical motif that the orchestra just can't quit. Some visitors from the continent wrote home, warning friends to expect a certain odor of English hospitality. But scholars still debate whether these were polite euphemisms or genuine attempts to prepare sensitive noses. Was it just that England produced so much cheese? Or was it the particular way Londoners stored it? Stacked in windowsills and hung in cellars, ripening into something both nourishing and nostril-searing? Even the famous playwrights poked fun at it. There's an old joke in an Elizabethan comedy about courting a London girl and being stuck with a dowry of parlour cheese and perpetual perfume. Quirky. Yes, but also practical. Cheese didn't rot quite as fast as milk, didn't attract as many rats as bread, and, in a pinch, could be traded for almost anything: ale, eggs, or even a spot near the window in your local tavern. Just hope the window opens. People wrapped it in waxed cloth or pressed it into clay pots, hoping to trap the flavor and, more importantly, the smell. But these well-meaning attempts often just created new varieties of, let's call them, vintage aromas. All around you, the city stirs. Chimney smoke lifts above the rooftops, mingling with the curds and way wind. And somewhere a street musician tunes a battered lute. Someone hawks yesterday's bread, still better than this morning's cheese. Some would argue, and a gaggle of children rushes past, giggling with mouthfuls of what might be their only meal of the day, a wedge of cheese stolen from a merchant's stall. And as you keep moving, nose half wrinkled but heart oddly warm, you begin to understand that London's aroma isn't just a joke or a historical footnote. It's the smell of survival, of tradition, and of a city finding comfort wherever it can. You follow the noise to the heart of the city, where London's great markets are coming to life. Here, beneath striped awnings and clattering wooden stalls, the air grows thicker, ripe with promise and, of course, every possible form of cheese. You weave through a maze of jostling elbows, greasy aprons, and the occasional dog on a mission. Merchants shout their wares with practiced bravado: fresh curds, morning cheddar, cheese fit for a queen, 2 pennies for a taste. One burly vendor, his beard dotted with crumbs, swears his Wensleydale is so smooth, it'll mend your teeth before it melts them. You laugh, but it's only half a joke. Dental care is a wild concept here. The cheese isn't just a product, it's an entire economy. Wheels the size of cartwheels glisten in the morning light, sweating under rough cloth. Some are cut open to reveal gooey, golden insides. Others sport rinds so hard you'd need a chisel, or at least a determined rat, to get through. People haggle, sniff, prod, and, if they're feeling bold, sneak a nibble when the merchant turns his back. It's a communal theater of commerce, a symphony of trading and tasting that hums along with the city's heartbeat. You sidestep a tottering stack of crumbly cheese rounds and nearly collide with a woman selling special remedies for gout, each cure suspiciously resembling her other, less miraculous cheeses. A boy offers you a bite of something called sack cheese, supposedly aged in sherry barrels for extra kick, though you suspect the kick is more likely a byproduct of questionable storage. The cheese here has personalities, some friendly, some feral. A wheel of Gloucester winks at you with a crust of blue-green veins, daring you to try your luck and stomach. It isn't all savory spectacle. Down a quieter lane, you spot a cluster of stalls specializing in fresh milk, soft butter, and unripened curds, delicacies for the upper crust, and objects of envy for those who subsist on yesterday's leftovers. You overhear 2 fishwives arguing about which dairy stall actually stinks less, and which merchant is cheating by adding flour to bulk up their wares. Historians still argue whether such adulteration was widespread, or just the anxious gossip of city life. You try not to laugh when one insists she can sniff out a fake from 20 paces. Even in a fog. Food safety regulations? Not a thing. If you fall ill, you blame the weather, the phases of the moon, or perhaps the local witch. But never the cheese, at least. Not publicly. Everyone has their own trick for picking the best wheel. Some squeeze, some knock, and one bearded elder mutters a quick prayer to Saint Brigid, patroness of dairymaids. You watch as an apprentice tries to pass off a suspiciously light cheese by wrapping it in extra cloth and announcing it as exceptionally airy. Someone in the crowd scoffs. That's just tomorrow's wind with a rind on it. It's not all fun and games. The city's less fortunate often resort to scavenging discarded cheese rinds or bartering small scraps for a handful of vegetables. You catch a glimpse of an old woman stuffing stale bits into her apron, her eyes darting nervously. It's a reminder. Cheese isn't just comfort food, it's survival currency. In a world where the next meal is never guaranteed, even a dry crust is a treasure. The market is also a great equalizer. Rich and poor alike crowd the stalls, elbows bumping, voices rising, everyone lost in the singular pursuit of a good bargain and a tolerable breakfast. You spot a nobleman's page, his fine doublet dusted with cheese shavings, and a group of sailors fresh off the riverboats, pockets bulging with hard cheese meant to last the week. The crowd swirls and presses, united by hunger and the hope that today's cheese will be a little less adventurous than yesterday's. Quirky tidbit. In some corners, you find singing cheeses, rounds with tiny holes that, when squeezed, emit a faint, musical whistle. Whether this is by accident or design, nobody agrees, but it's a favorite trick for children, and a source of endless debate for their tired parents. You linger at a stall where a merchant sprinkles crushed herbs on creamy curds, swearing the mixture cures heartbreak, headaches, and even unpleasant neighbors. You sample a bite. The herb is more bitter than magical, but it does distract you from the funk wafting off his apron. Even here, in the heart of trade, the line between nourishment, medicine, and entertainment blurs. As the sun climbs, the market grows louder, the smells sharper, the sense of urgency greater. Some historians still argue whether this feverish, cheesy commerce was more about necessity or tradition. Was cheese truly London's favorite food, or just the one they couldn't escape? The debate rumbles on, much like your stomach, and as you drift onward, you can't help but wonder. In a city where everything comes back to cheese, is it any wonder you can't quite get the smell out of your hair? Leaving the chaos of the market behind, you edge down a narrow lane and duck through a crooked doorway. Welcome to a typical Tudor home, where every room is designed for maximum coziness and minimum ventilation. The moment you step inside, it's like you've entered a soft, musty cocoon. Wood smoke mingles with the ever-present dairy scent, and you realize the architecture here is almost purpose-built for trapping every odor. Especially cheese. The low ceilings are braced with heavy beams, sometimes warped and always dust-laden. The walls are wattle and daub, a polite term for sticks, mud, and straw, occasionally held together by prayers and last year's cheese rind. Windows, if they exist at all, are tiny things stuffed with oiled cloth or slats, better at blocking fresh air than sunlight. Every surface, table, bench, bed, is covered with textiles that haven't seen soap in weeks, maybe months. Laundry is an ordeal, so most people rely on the magical power of shaking things out and hoping for the best. You wander into the main hall, stepping carefully around a low fire whose smoke barely escapes through the roof. A wheel of hard cheese sits on the table, solemn as a family heirloom, and next to it, a smaller crock of soft cheese, wrapped in cloth and emitting a scent that can only be described as ambitious. Everyone seems used to the aroma. You catch a small child nibbling from a wedge, unfazed by what's clearly a living science experiment. Cheese isn't just food here, it's furniture, centerpiece, and emergency snack all in one. As you make your way through the cramped, labyrinthine rooms, it becomes clear why cheese is so inescapable. Families often store their dairy wherever there's space, tucked into cupboards, hung from the rafters, even perched on window ledges to mature. Historians still argue whether this haphazard approach was genius or just necessity. Did the cold, damp climate actually help the cheese ripen? Or did it just make things extra fragrant? No one can agree, but your nose has already cast its vote. On the ground floor, you spot an ingenious, if questionable, solution. The cheese press. A device designed to squeeze out excess whey and, incidentally, release great plumes of aroma into the home. You marvel at the cleverness of it. Why let that cheese ferment quietly when you can make the whole family share the experience? It's communal living, Elizabethan style. A family member demonstrates how cheesecloths are washed and dried, usually in the same tub that serves for clothes, dishes, and sometimes even the baby. The scent, shall we say, lingers. You realize that, in these houses, cheese smell isn't an inconvenience, it's part of the very walls. If you ever managed to air the place out, everyone would probably worry that something was terribly wrong. You move upstairs, ducking under a beam, and find a sleeping loft crowded with straw pallets. At the foot of each bed, small bundles of food are carefully stored for easy midnight snacking. Hard cheese, especially, is prized. It won't spoil overnight. And some claim the aroma keeps away pests, though it may simply keep away your siblings. Quirky detail. Some families swear by the tradition of cheese maturing parties, where neighbors gather to sample aging wheels and swap gossip. These impromptu cheese tastings often double as matchmaking events, because nothing says romance like finding someone who tolerates your family's signature stink. There's a certain coziness here. If you can get past the dense, cheesy atmosphere, the fire crackles, children play with carved wooden toys, and outside, you hear the city's ceaseless thrum. You wonder how long it takes to become nose blind. But for now, every inhale is an adventure. Historians still argue whether these domestic arrangements were a product of poverty, practicality, or just tradition passed down from time immemorial. Did Londoners truly embrace cheese as a lifestyle? Or did they simply lack the means, and the windows, to do otherwise? Whatever the case, you're left with the inescapable truth. Elizabethan homes are designed to keep the cheese in and the fresh air out. If you're hoping for a breath of clean spring breeze, You're in the wrong century. You settle onto a creaky bench at a battered trestle table. And breakfast is served. It's a simple affair, nothing fancy. But filling. A slice of coarse bread. Maybe a sliver of salted fish if you're lucky. And, predictably, a hearty wedge of cheese. You bite in, the crumbly edge flaking between your teeth. And it dawns on you that this isn't just a breakfast food. It's the backbone of every meal. For everyone, everywhere, no matter their station. In Elizabethan England, cheese is both the great equalizer and the ever-present culinary constant. You chew thoughtfully, glancing around as the household wakes. Children slurp mugs of weak ale, dunking hunks of cheese for flavor. The lady of the house slices off pieces for servants, each chunk carefully measured. Even the family dog noses around for scraps. It's clear, cheese is too precious to waste. And nobody wants to risk running out before market day. Historians agree that the daily Elizabethan diet was dominated by bread, cheese, and, for the lucky, small amounts of preserved meat. Fresh fruit and vegetables were seasonal luxuries. The real prize was protein. And cheese delivered. The wealthy indulged in delicate, creamy varieties, sometimes flavored with sage or caraway. The poor made do with hard, aged rounds that could double as doorstops. Some scholars even debate whether certain villages survived tough winters solely because their cheesemakers were exceptionally gifted, or exceptionally stingy. As the day moves on, you see that cheese makes its way into every meal. Lunch, or dinner, as they call it, might feature cheese baked into pies or scattered atop roasted roots. For supper, more cheese, perhaps mashed into porridge, or fried in shallow pans until golden brown and crispy at the edges. You watch, slightly in awe, as a young servant manages to sneak a wedge from the pantry with the practiced skill of a cat burglar. Nobody blames her, in a world where supplies run thin and hunger is a constant worry. Cheese is survival. Yet it isn't just necessity, there's ritual, too. On feast days, people serve up soft cheese wrapped in herbs, accompanied by honey and dried fruit. At weddings, a giant wheel of cheese is sometimes paraded through the streets before being hacked apart for the crowd. There's a deep satisfaction in watching people gather, laughing and bickering, every face shining with anticipation. The joy isn't just in eating, it's in knowing the cheese will last. Quirky tidbit. During especially lean times, families get creative. You see one woman boiling the last scraps of cheese rind with leeks and barley, creating a broth she swears is as good as gold. Children dunk stale bread into it, grateful for something warm. If you're really desperate, there's cheese soup, a dish so famously bland that it's the subject of endless jokes in the city's alehouses. It's not all cheer. The memory of famine lurks in every household. There's always talk of what would happen if the cheese ran out. Some believe you'd grow weak and listless, others joke, more darkly, that you'd simply go mad from the boredom of plain bread. Historians still argue whether cheese shortages ever truly threatened London's stability, or if these tales are just the anxious storytelling of people for whom hunger is never far away. Over time, cheese becomes almost a character in its own right, a guardian of the larder, a symbol of prosperity. A friend who sticks around through lean months. You note that every family seems to have their own preferred style, tangy and crumbly, dense and mellow, smoked, spiced, or simply whatever they can get their hands on. You're invited to compare flavors, and the conversation quickly devolves into good-natured arguments over which region produces the real cheese. Spoiler: it's always wherever your mother was born. By evening, the table is reset. The day's remaining cheese carefully wrapped for tomorrow. Candles flicker, shadows lengthen, and you settle in beside the fire. A last crumbly mouthful lingering on your tongue. Somehow, you don't mind the smell anymore. It's become a part of you. The rhythm of Elizabethan life, reliable, enduring, and just a little bit funky. You stroll through the crooked side streets of London, already half accustomed to the rich, dairy-laden air, and find yourself face to face with a cheese stall promising miracles and marvels. Today's adventure? Sampling the city's oddest regional cheeses and the peculiar beliefs that have sprouted up around them. You might expect a simple wedge or wheel, but the Elizabethans take cheese seriously, sometimes superstitiously, always inventively. Your first taste is a waxy, neon yellow, Banbury cheese, beloved for its tang and alarming color. Legend has it that Banbury cheese will keep you strong all winter. though critics say it's mostly useful for holding open windows. A nearby vendor peddles blue-veined Stilton, which he claims can cure nightmares if kept under your pillow, though you suspect it's more likely to summon them. Around the corner, a shy apprentice sells sage cheese. Its marbled green hue considered a lucky omen for marriage. There's even cream cheese for special occasions. But most Londoners view it as far too delicate for daily survival. With every bite, you realize cheese in this city is about more than nutrition. It's folklore, medicine, and the occasional prank. One old woman swears by stinking bishop, not just as a snack but as a poultice for sprains and bruises. She insists, rub a bit on your sore ankle. You'll walk by sundown, though no one will walk with you. You're almost tempted to test it out, but decide to keep your shoes on and your dignity intact. It doesn't stop there. You overhear two scholars, one slightly tipsy, debating whether cheese left to ripen beneath the moon really does gain mystical properties. Some Londoners whisper that blue cheeses can ward off evil vapors, while others mix curds with herbs and hide them in rafters, hoping to charm away sickness. Historians still argue whether these beliefs stemmed from ancient pagan traditions or if they were just convenient excuses for creative cheesemaking. You have to admire their resourcefulness. If life hands you stinky cheese, turn it into a magical talisman. There's no shortage of dubious remedies. A mother gives her coughing child a thin slice of hard rennet, mumbling about its soothing powers. A butcher claims his smoked cheese can heal heartbreak, though, judging by his single status, results may vary. You learn that some people even tied cheesecloths around their necks to prevent sore throats. You try to imagine a future where doctors prescribe cheddar, and can't help but snicker. As the day winds down, you notice how cheese rituals weave into every aspect of life. Weddings feature blessing cheeses that are broken over the heads of newlyweds carefully. One hopes. Midwives recommend soft curds for nursing mothers. Children invent games involving tossing cheese rinds, claiming it brings good luck if the rind lands upright. Every home has a favorite cheese myth, most of them passed down with a wink and a nudge. Quirky tidbit: at one local festival, villagers compete to roll wheels of cheese down a muddy hill. The winner claims both the cheese and a year's worth of good fortune, though after tumbling through the muck, you're not sure how much is left of either. Historians still argue whether London's cheese obsession was driven more by need or nostalgia, by genuine belief or the simple desire for comfort in uncertain times. But one thing's certain, here, cheese is never just cheese. It's a little magic, a lot of superstition, and a hefty chunk of daily joy. By now, you're no longer surprised when someone offers you a wedge and claims it can predict the weather. If it's soft, rain's coming. If it's hard, best bring your mittens. You take a bite, savor the odd tang, and realize that in Elizabethan London, every cheese tells a story, and every story, it seems, comes with its own aroma. You step back into the clamor of the city, thirst prickling at your throat. The nearest well sits at the corner, its wooden bucket trailing mossy green. You hesitate, because you've heard the warnings. In Elizabethan London, the water is, politely put, unreliable. Better to risk the cheese than the Thames. Someone jokes behind you, and the crowd laughs knowingly. No one here trusts the water. Everyone has a story about a neighbor brought low by a bad cup. So, like everyone else, you turn to safer, if stranger, options. Drinks where cheese finds its way in. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident. You watch as a vendor pours out mugs of posset, a thick, milky brew curdled with ale and sweetened with spices. It smells oddly inviting, like a cross between warm pudding and old laundry. But it's considered a luxurious nightcap for those who can afford it. For the working class, cheese is often added to weak beer or ale, turning a thin drink into a protein boost. You sip a mug offered by a grinning lad who promises it's better than water, and it sticks to your ribs. He's not wrong. The drink is lumpy, filling, and leaves your lips sticky. The city's obsession with cheese-laced drinks extends to all ages. Children slurp curds and whey, their faces scrunched with concentration as they fish for the last glob of cheese at the bottom of the bowl. Some claim it's the secret to growing strong. Others joke it's just an excuse to avoid another mouthful of river water. One elderly woman, toothless and proud, insists she's lived to 80 by drinking nothing but cheese beer, though you suspect her definition of beer is as flexible as her stories. The truth is, London's water sources are a gamble. Wells draw from shallow, often polluted ground, pipes. When they exist, leak as much as they deliver. Historians still argue whether the city's constant fear of waterborne illness led directly to the rise of cheese, and beer, and ale, and every other, safe, beverage. Was it genuine caution, or did Londoners simply prefer their drinks thick and their excuses thicker? Quirky tidbit: in the winter, vendors hawk steaming pots of cheese broth, a concoction so dense it's said to double as wallpaper paste. It's supposedly nutritious, though it's more likely to gum up your insides than cure your ills. You watch a group of apprentices dare each other to finish a whole mug. Winner gets the honor of feeling slightly less hungry and slightly more sluggish for the rest of the day. You move on, passing taverns where the drinks menu is as much about curdled concoctions as it is about actual spirits. Patrons debate the merits of sack posset versus ale posset, each with its own peculiar bite. At one dimly lit alehouse, a group of regulars invent a new game, cheese in the cup, where the goal is to fish out the curd with your tongue. No hands allowed. The winner is crowned Dairy Duke until the next round, proof that even the simplest pleasures are elevated by a city addicted to both cheese and distraction. It's not all laughs. You see the quiet desperation in the eyes of mothers as they boil water for hours, hoping to make it drinkable. Then add cheese to mask the flavor. You overhear one doctor insisting that a slice of cheese after every drink will seal the belly and keep out illness. Whether this is science or superstition, nobody can say. Historians still debate the medical advice of the time, especially when it seems more about comfort than cure. But the people endure, and as you walk on, mug in hand, you find a sort of charm in the city's rituals. The cheese might be lumpy, the water dubious, and the drinks more mysterious than refreshing. But there's a certain camaraderie to it all. You lift your cup in silent salute to Londoners past, resourceful, resilient, and never far from their next serving of dairy. You follow your nose to the water's edge, where the wide, brown Thames heaves past in its ancient, unstoppable current. Here, the scent takes on a new complexity, a thick stew of river mud, fish, raw sewage, and something faintly metallic that you hope is just the tide. Yet, despite all that, the underlying tang of cheese still floats through the air, stubborn and unmistakable. If there's one place where the city's smells do battle, it's the riverbank. It's not hard to see why. Barges bob along the current, heavy with goods, barrels of salted fish, bales of wool, and, of course, wheels of cheese, stacked and sweating under canvas. You watch as porters unload cargo with shouts and laughter, sometimes dropping a round into the muck, only to fish it out and send it on its way. A little river never hurt a good cheddar. Someone jokes, wiping slime off the rind with a sleeve. You doubt that. But here, nothing goes to waste. The Thames is lifeblood and landfill both, London's main waterway and its biggest dump. By the 16th century, everything flows into it. Offal from butcher shops, slops from kitchens, laundry suds, the occasional dead dog, and who knows what else. Historians still argue whether the city's river was more useful or hazardous. Some say it kept trade moving, while others blame it for every bad harvest and plague. Whatever the truth, you can't help but marvel at the city's sheer ability to function amid such fragrant chaos. Near the docks, tanners and dyers work their craft, tipping their chemical-laden water into the Thames. The result? A river that smells as bold and complicated as the city's people. Yet, the cheese market carries on. Oblivious or perhaps just resigned, porters stack wheels of hard Gloucester near open barrels, sometimes using them as makeshift seats. Seagulls circle, hopeful for a crumb, while children play games that involve rolling cheese rounds dangerously close to the edge. Quirky tidbit: there's a local legend that the Thames once ran so thick with whey, discarded from London's dairies, that for a week in 1584, the water frothed white at the edges. People called it the river of milk, and some adventurous souls even dared to scoop up the foam to spread on bread. Whether it tasted any good, or anyone survived the attempt, is left to the imagination. You catch the eye of a fisherman patching his net, who waves you over with a toothless grin. Ever caught a cheesefish? He asks. Deadpan. You play along, learning that cheesefish is local slang for the lumps of curd and rind that sometimes float downstream, escaping from the city's markets. Children try to hook them for fun, though. Unlike real fish, they're not much for supper. Amid all this, the Thames has its defenders. Some claim that the river's constant movement sweeps away the worst of the city's filth, sparing Londoners from the fate of more stagnant towns. Others disagree, insisting that the only thing swept away is common sense. Historians still debate how many of London's plagues and summer fevers can be traced back to the river, and how much blame belongs to the air, the food, or just bad luck. As you sit by the bank, feet dangling over the water, you breathe in deeply, then immediately regret it. The battle of odors wages on. A gust from upriver brings hints of hay and wood smoke. But always, underneath it all, there's that persistent cheesy note. Maybe it's the cheese market. Maybe it's the city's diet. Or maybe London's just determined to leave an impression, long after you've washed your clothes. One thing's for sure, in Elizabethan London, the Thames may carry many things, but it never quite drowns out the scent of cheese. You wander back from the river, brushing the Thames dust from your sleeves, and spot a pair of well-dressed Londoners fussing with their elaborate collars in a shop window. Fashion here is a spectacle: ruffles, ribbons, velvets, and brocades. But there's a hidden truth beneath the lace, no matter how fine the fabric. The scent of cheese lingers, clinging stubbornly to every fold and seam. You step inside a bustling tailor's shop, squeezing past bolts of cloth stacked like towers. The air is stuffy, warm, and, inevitably, laced with a faint dairy tang. Apprentices dart back and forth, pressing doublets and shaking out linen shirts in a vain attempt to freshen them up. Laundry, you quickly learn, is a rare and complicated affair. Water is precious and soap is expensive. So most people make do with brushing and airing their clothes, or, if truly desperate, relying on herbs and perfumed sachets. A fashionable woman dabs her wrists with rosewater, only to grimace as the sweet floral scent mingles with an undercurrent of mature cheddar. She pulls a scented handkerchief from her sleeve, presses it to her nose, and you can't help but notice the blue-green spot marring its corner, a hint that it's spent a little too long in a damp drawer with last week's cheesecloth. Perfume is popular, but the battle is uphill. The best scents in the city can only hope to mask, not conquer, the all-pervasive cheese. You watch as young nobles parade through the street, their stiff collars and elaborate cuffs a statement of status. But even they aren't immune. The intricate folds of a starched ruff are perfect hiding places for crumbs and, inevitably, for that persistent tang. Some young men boast about their laundry days, once a fortnight if you're rich, once a season if you're not. The city's laundresses are wizards with boiling cauldrons, but even they can't scrub out the ghost of 1,000 cheese suppers. Quirky tidbit: there's a fashion among London's elite for perfumed gloves, stuffed with lavender or marjoram. The trend started as a way to keep hands sweet, but soon became a running joke: smells good, until you scratch your nose after supper. At the city's inns and taverns, handkerchiefs scented with spices are passed around at feasts, more for defense than for show. You catch someone tucking a slice of lemon in their pocket, hopeful that citrus can win the war against the city's signature aroma. Despite all efforts, the cheese always wins. As you stroll past the public baths, open only one day a week, you see a line of hopeful bathers clutching their linen shifts and bars of harsh lye soap. The bathhouse steam is scented with herbs, and for a brief, magical moment, you almost believe the air is fresh. Then, as you step outside, the wind carries a gust of warm, familiar dairy right back under your nose. Historians still argue whether Elizabethans cared about personal hygiene at all, or if it was simply a matter of practicality. Was the perfume craze just a fashionable cover for deeper problems? Or did people truly believe that sweet scents could ward off illness? One thing's certain: the city's creative hygiene tricks, perfumed wristbands, sweet bags, even sprigs of rosemary pinned to cloaks, do little to mask the overwhelming presence of cheese. You find yourself grinning at the ingenuity and persistence of it all. No matter how many rose petals you stuff in your sleeves, no matter how tightly you fasten your ruff, London will always remind you where you are. Here, even the finest silk smells faintly of supper. You're ushered through tall gates and into the glittering world of Elizabethan royalty, a palace banquet in full swing. Gold-embroidered tapestries drape the walls. Musicians pluck gentle tunes. And a long table gleams with pewter platters and silver goblets. For a moment, you almost forget the city's everyday funk. Until a servant sweeps past carrying a cheese so pungent it makes the torch flames flicker. Welcome to the upper crust, where even the Queen's table is not immune to the charms and pitfalls of dairy. You take your seat near the end of the feast, next to a gentleman in a hat so enormous it could conceal an entire Stilton. He lifts his goblet and sighs. Ah, the scent of England, cheese with just a note of swan. The meal is a parade of delicacies, roast meats, glazed fruits, candied violets, and, woven through every course, cheese in nearly every form. Creamy cheeses fill pies. Hard cheeses are sliced and stacked beside honeyed walnuts. Even the vegetables are roasted with shavings of sheep's cheese for continental flavor. You can't help but notice the Queen herself savoring a tiny morsel of her favorite, sage derby, before slipping a scrap to one of her royal spaniels. At the heart of these feasts, cheese is more than food, it's a statement. Imported wheels from France or Italy are rare treasures, boasted over and doled out in slivers, while homegrown cheddars and Gloucesters are a mark of English pride. Nobles swap cheese-tasting notes as earnestly as diplomats exchange secrets. You overhear a courtier loudly insisting that the King of Spain's Manchego is nothing next to a proper Suffolk blue. This debate, historians still argue, was both culinary and political, cheese rivalries echoing the power struggles of the era. But royal banquets aren't just about elegance. There are moments of chaos, too. One distracted pageboy trips, launching a plate of warm cheese fritters onto a bishop's lap. Laughter bubbles up around the table, muffled only by the next course. A hapless cook, desperate to impress, accidentally serves a batch of over-fermented, singing cheese. It lets out a series of soft, squeaking whistles as it's cut, leaving the guests torn between amusement and concern for their digestion. You nearly snort into your wine as an old earl declares, "If it's not singing, it's not supper." Quirky tidbit. Etiquette around cheese is a minefield. You watch as a nervous squire debates whether to use his knife or just tear off a piece with his hands. A whispered rumor floats down the table. Years ago, a minor noble was banished from court for using the wrong spoon in the soft cheese course. Whether this is true or just another courtly fable, nobody dares risk a repeat. Amid all the pageantry, you notice the palace kitchens working overtime, hundreds of hands crafting elaborate cheese towers and intricate pies. The kitchen hums with activity, filled with secrets and the occasional melodrama. A cook weeps over a ruined tart. A maid sneaks a bite from the royal wheel and flees with her prize. The scent of melting cheese drifts out through every corridor, lingering long after the last candle burns down. Historians still debate whether these lavish feasts genuinely reflected English tastes or were partly performance. Did royalty truly love their cheese? Or was it simply expected at such displays of abundance? Whatever the reason, the fact remains. Even in the grandest halls, Elizabethan England can't escape its dairy destiny. By evening's end, you stroll the gardens behind the palace, the stars blurred with torchlight and laughter. You realize that here, cheese is both delight and dilemma, an object of celebration, a cause for calamity, and always the unmistakable signature of the city and its rulers. You breathe in, and the aroma, rich, sharp, oddly comforting, follows you into the night.
You linger outside the palace where a new kind of unease is spreading through the city. Whispers of illness drift through the air, just as persistent as the scent of cheese. It's the era of the Great Plague's times when the mere hint of a cough makes people edge away, and everyone believes bad smells, or miasmas, carry sickness. In the anxious hush that settles over the city, you see desperate efforts to mask the stench, with cheese right in the middle of the drama. You walk past a healer's shop where dried herbs hang in bunches, and the doorway is strewn with crushed rosemary and thyme. Keeps out the miasma, the apothecary assures you, wafting a posy under your nose. Yet even he can't quite cover up the sharp background note of cheese stored behind his counter, supposedly aged to perfection, but possibly just forgotten. He offers you a taste, claiming it will strengthen the humors and protect against pestilence. You try a cautious nibble. It's tangy enough to make your eyes water, but whether it wards off illness is anyone's guess. Throughout the city, everyone is improvising. Some folks stuff cloves, juniper berries, or even cheese rinds into their mask-like plague beaks, the early ancestor of those famous bird-like masks. Historians still argue whether people really believed cheese could soak up foul airs, or if it was just a way to justify carrying snacks at all times. You spot a merchant with a pomander strung around his neck, a hollow ball filled with perfumed wax, and for extra luck, a slice of hard cheddar wedged inside. At home, families shut their windows, burn pungent herbs, and tuck cheesecloths into every nook and cranny. There's even a rumor that blue cheese, with its veined mold, is especially powerful at attracting evil vapors, drawing danger away from the children. One harried mother wafts a lump of Stilton near her baby's crib, then tosses it out the window, just in case. The science is dubious, but the ritual feels reassuring, a little act of control in a world turned upside down. Quirky tidbit. During especially bad plague years, Londoners compete to invent the most creative and questionable ways to clear the air. One neighbor insists on swinging a bag of cheese rinds over her head every morning. Another swears by boiling curds with vinegar for an all-purpose plague wash. No two houses have quite the same routine, but they all agree. If you can smell something strong, it must be keeping something worse away. Despite the best efforts, the fear never quite disappears. You watch as people cross themselves passing the city's crowded churchyards, and children whisper stories about invisible clouds of sickness that float through the alleys at dusk. Historians still debate whether these miasma theories prolonged the city's struggles or were simply the best explanation people had before germs were discovered. Either way, the battle of odors continues, cheese squaring off against every fragrant and foul-smelling rival the city can muster. Yet there's a certain resilience in all this ritual. You find a strange comfort in the candle-lit homes, in the shared efforts to hold back the darkness with scent and superstition. Cheese, it seems, isn't just food or folklore. It's a tiny shield against uncertainty, a familiar taste and smell in a world that refuses to stand still. By the end of the day, as you curl up by the fire with a final wedge of crumbly cheese, you realize that the city's greatest defense isn't its walls or its wealth, but its endless creativity and its stubborn refusal to let fear overpower the comforts of daily life. You leave the flickering hearths and step back into the bustling streets where the city's true workforce is hard at it. The air thickens with the mingled perfumes of labor tanners scraping hides, cheesemongers shouting their wares, and night soil men trudging down alleys, pails in hand. Every profession here leaves its own mark on the city's scent map, but you quickly discover that, somehow, cheese still manages to outstink even the fiercest rivals. Your first stop is a tannery, tucked behind high wooden fences to hide both its business and its odor. Workers soak hides in vats of urine and lie, their hands red and raw, while dogs doze by piles of discarded scraps. You hold your breath, but the wind carries a sharp undercurrent, an unmistakable edge of old cheese wafting from a cheesemonger's cart across the lane. Historians still argue whether the overwhelming scent of dairy actually helped dull the edge of the tanner's notorious funk, or if it just gave the city's rats more dinner options. You edge along to the cheesemonger's street, where the atmosphere is, if anything, more competitive. Here, rounds and wedges are stacked like gold, and every merchant has a trick for outshining the rest brighter cloths, fresher sprigs of sage, or a well-timed joke about French cheese that gets a roar from the crowd. A young boy waves you over, offering a sample of something so ripe it could walk off the table by itself. It's supposed to be like that, he assures you. The smell means it's ready. You take a nibble, finding it strong but oddly comforting. Another reminder that taste here is acquired and pridefully defended. A few doors down, the night soil men begin their rounds, hauling away the city's less mentionable byproducts. Quirky tidbit. They swear by a method of smearing a bit of cheese under their noses to ward off the worst smells, a trick borrowed from apothecaries and passed along as essential street wisdom. Whether it actually helps or just provides something more familiar to focus on, you can't say, but you admire their determination. As you pass a bustling cookshop, the cook calls out, "Try our cheese pies best in London. Keeps the tanners away." He winks, then admits that half his business comes from laborers desperate for a hot meal and a whiff of anything besides their own work. You pause to savor the air, a haze of baking pastry and bubbling cheese, with only the faintest shadow of leather and lye in the background. Historians still debate which of London's trades contributed most to the city's infamous bouquet. Was it the tanner's pits, the cheesemonger's cellars, or the daily parade of livestock through muddy lanes? Perhaps it was the night soil men, clattering along before dawn, who truly set the tone. One thing is certain: in this competition, cheese is never truly defeated. Whether it masks, mingles, or simply survives, the city's dairy scent persists, outlasting all attempts to clean or conceal. As you continue your wanderings, the sounds of work and the hum of barter follow you, blending into the aroma that defines this city. London may be a place of industry and invention, but you can't help thinking its real legacy is the scent that clings to every street, every shop, every worker, and every story told after dark. You find yourself drawn into the shadows of a noisy tavern, lured by the clatter of mugs and a rowdy chorus of laughter. It's not long before you hear the real business of London, the subtle, almost invisible art of negotiation, where cheese isn't just food, but a currency with real power. You sidle up to the bar and watch as a patron slips a small, wax-wrapped package across the counter, the barkeep tucking it away with a knowing nod. In Elizabethan England, it seems, a well-aged wedge is worth its weight in silver. At a crowded table, a boisterous debate is underway. A young lawyer boasts he landed a clerkship not with gold or promises, but with a whole wheel of Stilton. "Softened him right up," he crows, toasting the room with a chunk of cheese speared on his knife. Beside him, a merchant claims he secured passage for his goods down the Thames with nothing but a few slices of sharp cheddar. And a song about my grandmother's dairy cow. Whether these stories are tall tales or genuine city lore, historians still argue, was cheese really used for bribery, or is this just London's fondness for embellishment? You listen as more stories bubble up. Cheese opening doors, changing fortunes, and smoothing the rough edges of business and government. A city official grumbles that the real decisions get made over a shared platter, and he's only half joking. You learn that paying off the night watch with a wedge of double Gloucester can buy you a little peace, while a few coins worth of curds can make a tax collector squint and conveniently lose track of your debts. Quirky tidbit: some guilds even set annual dues in cheese, rather than cash. One weaver's guild, you overhear, famously required each member to deliver a cheese as large as a baby for their feast day, resulting in fierce but friendly competition for the honor of biggest and smelliest wheel. But it's not only bribes. Cheese plays a role in the city's social ladder, too. Ambitious young men arrive at dances or dinners with carefully chosen wedges tucked in embroidered pouches, hoping to impress the right host or win favor with a prospective father-in-law. One woman laughs that her marriage proposal came sealed in wax, tied to a lump of sage cheese. "He knew what I liked, that's for certain." Of course, fortunes can rise and fall on the quality of your cheese. The wrong gift, too crumbly or too pungent, might earn you a wrinkled nose or a reputation you'll never shake. You watch as a shy apprentice offers a hopeful bride a round of aged farmhouse and immediately wishes he'd chosen something less fragrant, as her mother fans the air with her handkerchief and pointedly opens the window. Historians still debate how much of London's daily wheeling and dealing was greased by dairy rather than coin. Was cheese truly currency, or just a symbol of generosity, trust, and resourcefulness? In a city where actual money is often in short supply, maybe the line doesn't matter. You step outside, feeling the warmth of laughter and the tang of melted cheese still in your nose. London's commerce is built on many things: cleverness, courage, maybe a dash of luck. But tonight, you can't help thinking it's also built on 1,000 quiet trades of cheddar, Stilton, and humble curds passed hand to hand. Night has fallen, and as the city quiets, a different kind of energy pulses through the winding lanes. Shadows stretch across the cobblestones, lanterns flicker, and you're drawn toward the huddled shapes swapping stories at the corner of a cheese cellar. The aroma is stronger now, part anticipation, part old curds, and soon you're swept up in a new Elizabethan tradition, sharing urban legends and ghost stories, all tinged, of course, with a touch of cheese. You find a spot beside a chimney sweep who starts things off with a whispered warning about the haunted Stilton cellar of Fleet Street. The tale goes that the ghost of a greedy merchant lingers there, forever doomed to guard a forgotten stash of blue-veined rounds. It's said you can smell the ghost before you see him. A wave of pungent air, sharper than even the oldest cheese in the vaults. Sometimes, late at night, people swear they hear the creak of the cellar door and the faint clinking of cheese knives. Not to be outdone, a midwife chimes in with a chilling account of the spectral cheesemaker of Whitechapel, a figure who appears in dreams to warn of impending shortages. She claims that if you ignore the warning and let your larder run dry, you'll awake to find all your bread turned to stale rinds. Quirky tidbit. Some families hang slivers of cheese above the hearth, hoping to ward off both thieves and bad luck, though some suspect it just encourages mice with refined tastes. You listen as the stories get stranger. One group of apprentices swears by the legend of the midnight curds, tiny, mischievous spirits who sneak into kitchens and swap out fresh cheese for sour lumps. The only defense? Leaving out a mug of warm ale before bed, and for good measure reciting a short poem to keep the curds amused. Historians still argue whether these tales originated as warnings for children or as sly jabs at careless cooks who let good cheese go bad. Of course, it's not all doom and gloom. Some tales paint cheese as a hero. An old baker tells how, during the last great fire, a well-placed wheel of cheddar stopped the flames from spreading to her shop. The smell alone scared off the sparks, she claims, earning a round of laughter from the group. As the wind rattles a shutter, you hear someone mutter about the lost cheese cart of Southwark, a phantom delivery wagon said to appear on foggy nights. According to the story, if you're very quiet, you can follow the scent and find a wedge tucked behind a drainpipe. Though, so far, everyone who's tried has ended up muddy, empty-handed, and teased by their friends for weeks. Historians still debate how seriously Londoners took these stories. Were they simply ways to pass the time and lighten the dark, or did people truly believe that cheese could haunt and protect in equal measure? Either way, the city's folklore is rich with dairy proof that in London, not even ghosts escape the city's signature scent. You finish the night's tales with a gentle shiver, half in amusement, half in anticipation. The streets are quieter now, but your imagination is busier than ever. You realize that in Elizabethan London, cheese isn't just woven into daily life. It's part of the stories people tell to make sense of the shadows, the cold, and the long, mysterious nights. You awaken to the distant clang of morning bells, and the city around you is already beginning to shift. Something is different. The air feels lighter, the bustle less frantic, and for the first time since you arrived, you catch hints of other scents drifting through the streets. Fresh bread, spicy pies, the fleeting sweetness of early flowers from a merchant's cart. Change is stirring in London, and so is the city's relationship with its famously cheesy aroma. As you stroll through the markets, you notice fewer wheels and wedges stacked at the stalls. Cheese is still here, but now it shares space with baskets of exotic fruits and sacks of foreign spices. Sailors and merchants bring tales of new flavors from distant lands, coffee from Arabia, chocolate from the New World, even teas from the Far East. The city's palate is broadening, and the local cheesemakers feel the competition. You pass a group of apprentices arguing over the virtues of sugar versus sage, the merits of French brie over English cheddar. The great cheese debates still echo through the alleys, but the old certainty is gone. Everyone seems more willing to try a slice of something new. Some worry this will be the end of the golden age of English cheese, but others are curious, even excited, about the culinary possibilities. Historians still argue whether foreign imports mellowed the city's atmosphere or simply covered up its true spirit for a little while. You peek inside a wealthy home where the lady of the house serves pastries dusted with cinnamon instead of the usual cheese pies. Her guests sip spiced wine and nibble at delicate sweets. There's talk of Italian cooking, of creamy sauces and herby pastas. You sense a little nostalgia. One guest sighs, "It's lovely, but nothing fills a room like a good cheddar." Still, the mood is optimistic. Londoners are practical and quick to adapt. Quirky tidbit: cheese never completely leaves the scene. Instead, it finds new roles grated over roasted vegetables, paired with imported figs, and even blended into the earliest versions of macaroni pie, a precursor to mac and cheese. The city may be growing more cosmopolitan, but it's still very much itself at heart. On quieter streets, you meet older cheesemongers who shake their heads at changing tastes. Some insist that nothing good ever came from foreign muck, while others experiment, mixing native curds with new herbs and spices, hoping to catch the next wave of foodie fashion. A clever few thrive, marketing their products as traditional English cheese, now with a hint of the mysterious Orient. It's all about survival and a bit of clever branding. Historians still debate whether this era truly marked the decline of the cheesy city, or if London's aroma simply shifted with the times. The records aren't clear, and the legends blur fact and fancy. What's certain is that even as the markets change, the old scents never quite disappear. A bakery's door swings open, and for a second, there it is. That familiar, comforting tang, peeking out from beneath the sugar and spice. You pause to savor it, realizing that some things, no matter how the world evolves, leave their mark forever. London may change, grow, and welcome new flavors, but the memory of centuries-old cheese, sharp, persistent, and oddly reassuring, will always linger, just beneath the surface. You wander through the evening calm, streets winding quieter, the old city relaxing its grip as the sky dims to velvet blue. The bustle of the day is fading. Lanterns glow softly in windows, and somewhere a lone piper draws out a tune as gentle as a lullaby. There's a peacefulness here, and for the first time, you sense London's age, not as a roar, but as a slow, contented sigh. The air is still tinged with that familiar, comforting tang of cheese, but it's gentler now, softened by the passing centuries and the city's new rhythms. You find yourself passing through neighborhoods that once echoed with the clamor of markets, the calls of cheesemongers, and the laughter of children rolling cheese rounds down muddy lanes. Now, you spot quieter shops, some selling fresh cakes, others imported teas, but there's always a lingering wedge of cheddar or a dusting of curds in the display, nodding to old traditions. Every corner seems to hum with memories. Even the river's scent is subdued, touched by a breeze that brings with it a mingling of stories and sighs. You pause outside a small tavern where an elderly innkeeper sits polishing a well-worn cheese board. She glances up, offers you a smile, and gestures for you to sit by the hearth. As you do, she shares one last tale, a gentle ghost story about a cheesemaker who still strolls the banks of the Thames at dawn, checking on his ripening wheels, making sure the city never forgets its roots. She says he leaves a tiny wedge on the doorstep of every bakery, so that even as new aromas fill the air, the taste of London's past is never far away. Historians still argue whether the city's cheesy reputation ever truly vanished, or if it simply lives on in new forms. Hidden in every bakery, whispered in every tavern, a secret handshake among those who remember the old days. You lean back, watching the flames flicker, listening to the gentle sounds of the city winding down. The old anxieties, fears of famine, plagues, and shortages feel distant now, their sharpness mellowed by time and retelling. Quirky tidbit. Some modern Londoners claim their dreams are sweeter if they nibble a bit of cheese before bed. Whether that's science or just an excuse for a midnight snack, no one really knows. But you smile at the thought and decide that tonight you'll join them. One last sleepy bite, a taste of history on your tongue as you drift off. The sounds outside grow softer. Distant voices, a dog barking, the city breathing slow and deep. You tuck yourself in, comforted by the gentle hush, the flicker of firelight, and the subtle, ever-present aroma of cheese. It's no longer overpowering, just a note in the lullaby of the city, an old friend settling you in for the night. Wind down, 300 words. Now, as the city settles under the hush of night, let every sense grow softer. The cobbled streets empty, the river flows quietly on, and the clamor of the markets fades to the gentlest echo. The cheese-scented air that was once sharp and insistent is now just a memory, like a faded song, warm and strangely comforting. You imagine yourself walking those old lanes, your steps slow, lantern swinging in hand, each breath drawing in not just the history, but the heart of London. A city made real by its peculiarities, its traditions, its laughter, and its scents. Let your muscles relax and your mind wander. Picture yourself at the edge of the Thames, its waters reflecting 1,000 little lights, the city's secret safe beneath the sleepy surface. All the stories of cheesemongers and market days, of haunted cellars and bustling banquets become soft and far away, like dreams already half remembered. The worries of the day work, hunger, change, dissolve with each easy, steady breath. There is nothing left to chase here, nothing to prove, nothing to solve. Only the gentle, friendly hush of a city that knows how to drift toward sleep. Feel yourself growing lighter with each moment. The world narrows to quiet comforts. The softness of your pillow, the slow warmth of your blanket, the distant lull of voices carried on the night air. You're safe, you're at ease, and all the odd and cozy aromas of London's past have faded to a whisper. Let the last of the city's gentle hums and cheese-scented lullabies carry you softly, peacefully, into the sweetest of dreams.